think one of the first mediums I started playing with was film photography in high school. Shortly after the last year of high school, I think it was grade 11, I found underground raves with my best friend at the time. We would make our own outfits, so that was something very special and exciting for me as far as making art was concerned. And then I would just show up to the parties with my film camera and documented the fashion at the time. I was very, very fascinated with fashion. I still am, but back then it was so stimulating to me on a creative level to see people's outfits. It was the beginning of my art career, and I didn't really know it at the time.
Let's go.
So I'm sitting here with all my rave memorabilia. This is one of my favorite parties. It was one of my friends who organized it, and it was very big. It was in a field in the middle of nowhere, and for that party I kept my outfit that I made. So yeah, that was my top. I also had this. That was a very important part of my outfit. Kind of made it come together. And this little necklace. This makes me feel like a dick butt. I made this chain. That was my favorite. It was like a big chain for my wallet. That's where it all started, pretty much. I'm an artist because I was a raver. I think it was fairly under control when I was going to underground raves because I was in a stable relationship. I had a stable job. But when raves died and no one really knew what to do with their time, that's kind of where it escalated, and I did not have a space to do art, and I had broken up with my ex-boyfriend at the time. I was not in school anymore, and so I just went all in with the drugs. And then I got to the point where my drug addiction was so out of control, I needed very large amounts, and so ultimately a lot of money to pay for that. And I was completely unable to keep jobs for more than a few weeks. So I got close to being homeless, and there's no way I did not want to let that happen. I knew that this was the end. If I become homeless, like, I'm gonna die pretty quickly. And so I had a friend at the time who was a sex worker, and I had exhausted all my other options, and I felt very trapped. I don't know, I just got to the point where I just kind of gave up on living. There were times where I found myself in some vacant mansions in the middle of nowhere, out of cell signal, and, I just thought, if I die here, no one's ever gonna find me. My parents don't know where I am. I became very paranoid at the time because girls would just share with each other and report on situations they experienced where they almost got killed, they got mugged, they got raped, they got, like, anything could go. And I started hiding knives. I taped knives to my furniture, and I was always over analyzing and being hyper vigilant. At some point I misjudged or misinterpreted a sudden shift in energy and body language, and I got pretty close to assaulting someone. And then I realized what I was about to do, and I was just like, oh my god, this is not going to end well. I'm going to end up murdered or in jail, or I'm going to die of an overdose. Is this the life I want to live? And it took me a really, really long time to recover from that, and the only thing that truly helped me get through that was making art. I think, like, at some point I decided to move to the Canadian Rockies. It was actually my therapist who encouraged it. He was amazing. Yeah, he really changed my life. I feel fortunate to have had such a great one. And he was like, yeah, I encourage you to convert a van into a camper and move to the Rockies with your cat and just go in nature, go hiking. That's where you feel at peace right now, and you need that. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. So that's what I did, and it was great. I started doing landscape photography once I got to Banff, and I wanted to, share what I was seeing, because most of my friends were probably never going to see that kind of beauty. And yeah, it was just very therapeutic for me to be in the mountains by myself. I think I hiked by myself for the first few years with just me and my cat, and we had an epic time until he passed away, and it was just his old days, me and his little leash. And yeah, I had an amazing time just exploring landscape photography there. This is kind of a pattern I've experienced in the past with a lot of different mediums I've explored, is I kind of reach a point where it doesn't do it for me anymore. It's not as stimulating and inspiring, and that's when I know I have to move on to something else. And I got to that point with photography, landscape photography at least. I just felt very limited with what I could say about my art and why I create, because it was the total opposite of the feelings that I was experiencing. It was very dark, overwhelming emotions, and I was just making pretty scenes in the nature, and it's just, that's not the raw emotions I need to get out of my system. But I didn't have anything else, so for a year and a half I was very depressed. I felt completely lost, and this is the worst feeling for me, and I'm sure many other artists can relate. I had built this career in crypto art that I was doing fairly well, and I didn't want to do what the collectors that bought my art expected me to do. So when AI started gaining popularity, I got very excited, because so many times I had these creative ideas in my head that I couldn't execute, either because of lack of funds, or I couldn't get to a location, or I didn't have the space to shoot. All these limitations that suddenly were not a barrier anymore with AI. There wasn't really an agent that was an actual artist, that looked like a real person, that was doing exhibitions, that was, had projects outside of crypto. So I thought it would be a really innovative idea to try to create a human from scratch and see how far I could go in my attempt to make her behave like a real person. For me, it was more about seeing how much of the creative process I could delegate to a bot, and to see if we can co-create together. So yeah, I wanted to explore performance art because I had never done it. I didn't know anything about it, and so I felt like it was a great challenge to see if I can make it look realistic without having any knowledge or skills. So I think as I learn all those new skills, my trajectory is becoming more and more clear for the upcoming years. I really wanted to start integrating more organic, natural processes with more technology. I was already foraging plants to make my own medicine, and now I decided it would be a great idea to collect more plant materials to make some textile dyeing experiments. I can dye my fabric now, and then I can throw it under the robot and expand on that, right? So I just felt like it was gonna open up more doors for creativity. Once you start your art career and you find a certain level of success, I think a lot of people get really scared to change because they might lose it all. And I think for me, I would never do it any other way. I am willing to take all the risks, to lose it all, to start over. I have started over so many times before. You have one life to live. Why limit yourself to doing things other people expect you to do when you're not feeling good about it?